The moment the truth begins to breathe inside a family already scarred by loss, it does not arrive as comfort. It arrives as pressure, as guilt, as memory sharpened into a weapon. For Lily, Malcolm's diagnosis does not feel like a medical crisis alone. It feels like judgment. It feels like fate reopening a wound she has never truly survived. The news that Malcolm is fighting aplastic anemia and may not have long without a bone marrow donor crashes into her life with the force of unfinished grief, because for Lily, no emergency involving her father can ever remain only in the present. Every second of Malcolm's decline drags Neil's shadow back into the room. Every hospital corridor, every whispered update, every fearful glance from loved ones becomes a reminder of the father she lost too suddenly and the helplessness that still poisons her from the inside. She could not stop death when it came for Neil. She could not prepare for it, bargain with it, or outrun it. That failure has lived inside her like a silent punishment ever since. So when Malcolm's life hangs in the balance, Lily does not simply see a chance to help. She sees a brutal, almost unbearable opportunity to rewrite the worst emotional defeat of her life. She sees a not too narrow opening through which she might finally strike back at the cruelty that once left her powerless. And that is exactly why this battle becomes so dangerous, because desperate love has a way of turning noble intentions into obsession. At first, Lily throws herself into the crisis with the iron focus of someone who has decided that sheer will can overpower biology. She clings to every possibility, every doctor's suggestion, every procedure, every faint sliver of hope that Malcolm can be saved before time runs out. But beneath that determination is a growing panic that she cannot confess to anyone because it would sound too selfish, too ugly, too raw. She needs to save Malcolm not only because she loves him, but because she cannot emotionally survive another father being taken from her while she stands there empty-handed. That distinction matters. It changes everything. It turns every delay into a personal insult, every obstacle into an enemy, every hesitant relative into someone she resents more than she should. As test results begin to suggest that Lily herself is unlikely to be the ideal donor, a quiet devastation takes hold of her. She had prepared herself for grief, fear, and uncertainty, but she had not prepared herself for rejection by hope itself. The body she lives in, the body she wanted to offer as proof of devotion, may not be enough. And once Lily realizes that her own marrow may not be Malcolm's salvation, her desperation mutates into something sharper and more complicated. Saving Malcolm is still the goal, but now the path leads straight toward another revelation, another fracture, another old betrayal waiting to detonate. That fracture has a name, and it is Holden, a man already carrying enough anger, enough suspicion, enough emotional distance to turn any family revelation into a battleground. The truth that Malcolm is his biological father does not arrive as healing. It arrives like an insult carefully preserved for decades. It arrives wrapped in the bitter knowledge that Stephanie knew, kept silent, and built an entire life on top of that silence. For Holden, the issue is not merely that he was denied information. It is that his identity was edited without his consent. His life was shaped by omissions, his loyalties formed in darkness, his anger perhaps even mislabeled all these years, because the root of it was hidden from him by the person who should have protected him most honestly. To learn that Malcolm, a man he barely knows, has been central to that buried truth is infuriating enough. To learn that this same man now urgently needs something from him is almost intolerable. In Holden's eyes, it looks grotesque. It looks like fate waited until Malcolm was vulnerable to force a bond Holden never asked for. It looks like blood suddenly matters only because a life is at stake. And nothing enrages a wounded man more than feeling useful only after being denied the dignity of truth. Stephanie's role in all of this becomes explosive because her secrecy was never neutral. Even if her motives once came from fear, shame, self-protection, or a misguided desire to control the fallout, the damage is real. The more Holden dwells on what was stolen from him, the more every past interaction in his life begins to curdle. He starts wondering which memories belong to him and which were engineered by someone else's cowardice. He questions not only Malcolm's absence, but Stephanie's entire moral authority. Every sacrifice she ever claimed, every hard choice she ever defended, every maternal instinct she ever used as justification begins to sound hollow inside his head. And once that erosion begins, It does not stop with her. It spills outward. It stains Malcolm. It even threatens to stain Lily, because she becomes the face of the family, now asking him to act with compassion while he is still choking on betrayal. Holden does not want to become cruel, but the situation corners him into cruelty anyway. The more people appeal to his conscience, the more he feels manipulated. The more they stress Malcolm's fragility, the more he feels his own pain is being treated as inconvenient timing. He has just discovered the architecture of a lie that shaped his life, and already the room wants him to behave generously. That is where Lily steps in, and where the emotional center of this story becomes truly volatile. Lily is the one person who can reach Holden in a way no doctor, no plea, and no family explanation can. She is not a stranger. She is not Stephanie. She is not Malcolm. She is his newly revealed half-sister, someone carrying the same bloodline, the same emotional wreckage, and the same impossible burden of figuring out what family means after the truth arrives too late. But Lily's position is not clean. She approaches Holden with compassion, yet her motives are layered with urgency, guilt, and fear. She wants him to test because Malcolm needs him. She wants him to test because it may be their only real chance. She wants him to test because if he refuses and Malcolm dies, she may never forgive him. But she also wants him to test because if he refuses and Malcolm dies, she may never forgive herself for failing to persuade him. This dual desperation colors everything she says, everything she feels, everything she suppresses. She tries to be patient, but patience begins to rot under the weight of time. She tries to respect Holden's pain, but respect becomes harder when every medical update sounds worse than the last. She tries to present the choice as his alone, but the truth is she has already emotionally charged the room with so much expectation that refusal starts to resemble a betrayal all its own. As Lily and Holden circle each other, a tense and painful sibling dynamic begins to form almost instantly. There is no easy warmth, no sentimental miracle, no immediate sense of belonging. There is curiosity, yes, and even a reluctant recognition, but it is tangled with resentment. Holden sees in Lily everything he was denied: legitimacy, history, connection, memories, a place in the family narrative. Even her grief over Neil, however genuine, irritates him because it reminds him that she had fathers to lose while he was denied the truth about one of his own. Lily, for her part, tries not to judge Holden's emotional distance, but she cannot help feeling wounded by it. She has spent years carrying the Winters name through storms, betrayals, and heartbreak. Family, to her, is sacred not because it is perfect, but because it must be fought for when life keeps trying to tear it apart. So when Holden resists, when he speaks or acts as though Malcolm's life is merely another burden unfairly placed on him, something fierce awakens in Lily. Her empathy collides with her fury. She wants to comfort him as a sister, shake him as a daughter, and condemn him as someone standing too close to a dying man with the power to intervene. That emotional contradiction makes her dangerous in her own right, because the more Lily fears losing Malcolm, the more capable she becomes of pushing Holden too hard. Meanwhile, Malcolm is caught in the most humiliating position imaginable for a man already carrying his own history of regret. Illness strips away pride first. It turns old mistakes into fresh accusations because the body's weakness makes moral vulnerability impossible to hide. Malcolm cannot escape the fact that his life may now depend on a son he never raised, never protected, and never openly claimed. Even if he had reasons once, even if he was kept at a distance by Stephanie's choices, the optics are brutal. Malcolm is forced to reckon with the possibility that Holden sees him not as a father in crisis, but as a stranger whose blood suddenly demands loyalty after decades of silence. That reality sickens him more deeply than the disease itself. The very hope that Holden might be a match also becomes a source of shame, because it exposes the emotional debt Malcolm never paid. He is not only fighting for survival, he is facing the possibility that to survive, he must accept life from someone who has every reason to hate what he represents. That imbalance eats at him. It fills him with self-disgust, helplessness, and dread that even if Holden agrees, the donation will not feel like love. It will feel like obligation performed under pressure, and that thought cuts deeply into the fragile optimism Malcolm tries to maintain. As the days grow more tense, the hospital becomes more than a medical setting. It becomes an arena for psychological warfare. Every corner seems to hold someone's grief, someone's accusation, someone's silent calculation about who is doing enough and who is not. Stephanie's presence becomes increasingly unbearable because every attempt she makes to explain herself only widens the wound. Whether she frames her secrecy as protection, fear, timing, or sacrifice, Holden hears none of it as maternal love. He hears control. He hears theft. He hears a woman who wanted to own the truth, until the truth became inconvenient to contain. Lily, who initially tries to keep the focus on Malcolm's condition, slowly begins to lose patience with Stephanie too. It is impossible not to. If Stephanie had told the truth earlier, Holden might have had years to process the bond, years to build even a cautious connection with Malcolm, years for this crisis not to feel like emotional extortion. Instead, everyone is now choking inside the consequences of her silence, and Lily begins to understand that this is not simply tragic, it is enraging. Stephanie did not just hide a fact. She created a future in which love, duty, and medical survival are now locked in the same poisoned room. This is where the darker instincts of each character begin to emerge. Lily starts making choices she would once have condemned. She watches Holden resist the pressure, watches him retreat behind anger and wounded pride, and she begins to think not like a grieving daughter, but like a strategist. She studies what might move him. She considers what truths to reveal, what emotional levers to pull, what guilt to sharpen. She hates herself for it, yet she continues because Malcolm's life is slipping. The line between persuasion and manipulation grows thinner by the day. Lily tells herself that she is only doing what the situation demands, only forcing clarity where denial has taken root. But the reality is more troubling. She is weaponizing grief, weaponizing blood, weaponizing the idea of family because she has run out of gentle options. In quieter moments, that realization horrifies her. She knows what it means to be pushed, cornered, judged by impossible standards. She knows how much damage can be done when pain is used as leverage. Yet she cannot stop. The need to save Malcolm has become larger than her comfort with her own methods. Holden responds to this pressure in the way wounded men often do when they feel emotionally trapped. He lashes out, pulls away, and flirts with making the cruelest possible choice simply to prove the choice is his. That does not mean he is heartless. In fact, his turmoil is so intense precisely because he is not. If he truly felt nothing, the decision would be easy. He would walk away. Instead, Holden is haunted by the possibility that somewhere beneath the rage, Malcolm's suffering does matter to him, and that possibility infuriates him. He does not want to be softened by biology. He does not want to be summoned into tenderness by a truth withheld too long. He does not want Lily's pain to move him, because if it does, then he must confront the part of himself still capable of family, and that part is frightening. It demands vulnerability. It demands that he stop defining himself only through the injustice done to him. So Holden's anger becomes both shield and prison. He tells himself that refusal would be an act of self-respect, a boundary finally enforced against people who expect his compassion after denying him honesty. But every time he hardens, he sees Lily's desperation, Malcolm's decline, and even the ruins of Stephanie's choices, and the certainty he wants refuses to come. There is also another truth simmering beneath the surface, one that makes everything more combustible. Lily does not entirely trust Holden. She may need him, but she does not know him. She senses how close he lives to the edge of bitterness, how easily his silence can thicken into something menacing, how quickly pain can turn into retaliation. So even as she fights to persuade him, she is also watching him, measuring him, wondering whether this newly discovered brother might save Malcolm only to use the aftermath as his own point of control. She cannot ignore the possibility that Holden, once confirmed as a match, might bargain emotionally for his place in the family. He may never say it openly, but the imbalance would be there. He would become the man who gave Malcolm more time, the man no one could afford to dismiss again, the man whose pain suddenly had proof of value. Lily understands power when she sees it, and she knows crises often rearrange family hierarchies in ways that linger long after the emergency ends. That thought unsettles her because it means even hope comes with a cost. As Malcolm weakens, those around him begin to split into camps defined not by love, but by method. Some believe Holden must be given space and allowed to come to the decision on his own. Others believe time has already run out for delicacy. Lily increasingly belongs to the latter group, though she hates admitting it. She begins pushing harder, confronting harder, refusing to let Holden disappear into self-protective distance. In another context, that intensity might look brave. Here, it begins to look almost ruthless. She accuses him with her eyes before she does with words. She forces him to see Malcolm's fragility. She makes it impossible for him to hide behind abstractions about betrayal without also confronting the immediate human cost of his delay. Holden resents her for this deeply. He starts to feel that Lily does not see him as a brother at all, only as a solution wrapped in unresolved trauma. And perhaps there is truth in that, which makes Lily's guilt even worse. She wants a real connection with him, wants this revelation to become more than crisis, but she cannot pretend Malcolm's survival is not the priority. Every time sentiment and urgency collide, urgency wins. Stephanie, watching her secrets destroy what remains of her moral authority, becomes increasingly desperate herself. She tries to salvage Holden's trust, tries to insist that her silence came from complicated circumstances, from fear of destroying multiple lives, from a desire to keep old chaos buried. But desperation makes her clumsy. The more she explains, the more self-serving she sounds. The more she reaches for sympathy, the more Holden sees manipulation. In his darkest moments, he begins to suspect that Stephanie still does not fully regret the lie itself, only the timing of its exposure. That suspicion is devastating because it strips away even the possibility of tragic nobility from her choices. Instead of a mother broken by impossible decisions, she becomes, in Holden's mind, the architect of a false life. Lily, too, starts to wonder whether Stephanie's silence was never about protection at all, but about control over narrative, reputation, and consequence. And once that suspicion takes hold, it poisons every conversation further. The family crisis is no longer only about saving Malcolm. It is about deciding whether the truth was withheld out of fear or out of selfishness, and whether those harmed by that silence owe anything to the people who created the damage. Still, amid all this fury, the possibility of grace refuses to die. That is what makes the story ache. Holden does go to the edge of refusal. He lets everyone believe for a time that he may walk away, that he may let Malcolm's fate unfold without interference, if only to protect the last scraps of power he feels he owns. But in private, his internal war becomes unbearable. He cannot escape the image of a man dying who may be his father, however late the truth came. He cannot escape the realization that if he refuses to test, he is not punishing Stephanie alone. He is not even punishing Malcolm alone. He is condemning himself to a future in which this moment will never stop echoing. He will always wonder whether saving Malcolm might have changed something inside him too. He will always hear Lily's grief. He will always ask whether his rage protected him or hollowed him out further. And for a man already tired of being shaped by other people's secrets, the thought of being forever shaped by his own refusal becomes too heavy to bear. When Holden finally agrees to be tested, the relief that moves through the family is real, but it is not pure. Relief and resentment arrive together. Lily feels gratitude so sharp it nearly breaks her. Yet part of her is still angry that it took this much agony to get there. Holden feels some measure of peace, yet he hates that everyone now looks at him as though decency has redeemed the delay. Malcolm, upon learning Holden may truly be a match, is overwhelmed, but not in a simple way. Hope floods him, yes, but so does shame. Stephanie experiences the cruelest irony of all. The son she denied the truth may now save the father she helped erase from his life. No one stands in uncomplicated light. No one escapes the ugliness that preceded the breakthrough. And when the results confirm that Holden is indeed the match Malcolm needs, the emotional stakes shift again. In another kind of story, this would be the triumphant moment when family heals through sacrifice. But here, the match does not erase the damage. It intensifies it. Holden is suddenly central to everyone's future. He becomes the bridge between Malcolm and survival, between Lily and hope, between Stephanie and the consequences of her deceit. The family must now reckon with the fact that the person most wronged by their silence is also the one holding the power to save them from the worst possible ending. That imbalance gives Holden an emotional gravity no one can ignore. Even if he never asks for recognition, even if he never tries to exploit the moment, the truth remains. The family needs him now in a way they never did before. And that realization humbles some while terrifying others. It means the old hierarchy is broken. It means secrets did not preserve control after all. They merely delayed a reckoning. For Lily, this is the point where her emotions become almost impossible to contain. She wants to thank Holden, embrace him, believe in him. She wants to imagine that this is the beginning of something strong and lasting between them, something born from pain but not imprisoned by it. Yet another part of her remains cautious. She knows one life-saving act cannot instantly undo years of absence, lies, and emotional confusion. She knows Malcolm's recovery, if it comes, will bring new questions, not fewer. What does fatherhood mean after such delay? What does siblinghood mean when it begins as a medical emergency? What happens when the crisis ends and everyone is left standing in the awkward light of survival, with no urgency left to force closeness? Lily fears that once Malcolm stabilizes, the family may not know how to live with the truth they fought so hard to survive. Yet she also knows something fundamental has shifted. Holden's choice, however reluctant, proves that blood alone is not destiny, but it is not meaningless either. A man can be furious, betrayed, and still choose not to let death write the final chapter. The procedure itself becomes a different kind of crucible. Every waiting hour strips everyone down to their most honest selves. Lily is forced to sit with the terrifying possibility that even now, after all this emotional devastation, hope may still fail. Malcolm must surrender himself to medicine, to weakness, to trust. Holden must endure the unsettling intimacy of giving part of himself to a father he is only beginning to understand. Stephanie must watch in silence, as the life she tried to manage from the shadows is now being held together by truths she can no longer control. There is no room left for performance. Only consequence remains. In that suspended time, each person confronts the same brutal lesson from a different angle. Love cannot be postponed without cost. Truth cannot be buried without rot. And survival purchased too late never comes clean. If Malcolm pulls through, the aftermath will not be some serene family restoration. It will be a fragile and complicated beginning, loaded with gratitude, suspicion, tenderness, and unresolved rage. Malcolm may see Holden as the son who gave him another chance at life, but Holden may not yet be ready to see Malcolm as father in any full emotional sense. Lily may feel she finally helped save someone she loves, but the victory will be haunted by how much of herself she had to compromise to make it happen. Stephanie may remain physically present in the family orbit, yet spiritually she will stand apart, marked by the knowledge that her secret almost cost Malcolm his life and Holden his soul. And that is where the story becomes richest. Because the real drama does not end with the successful donation, it begins there. Once death is pushed back, everyone must decide what to do with the life that remains. There may come a quiet moment, perhaps the first one untouched by immediate panic, when Malcolm and Holden share the kind of silence that does not accuse, does not demand, does not explain, not forgiveness, not yet, not belonging in any complete sense, but recognition. A small, fragile recognition that something irreversible has happened between them. Holden may never recover the years stolen from him. Malcolm may never repair all that absence allowed to harden. But between them now there is a fact stronger than secrecy. When the moment of truth finally arrived, Holden did not let Malcolm die. That choice will matter. It will matter to Malcolm, whose survival will forever be tied to a son he never truly knew. It will matter to Lily, who will see in Holden both the family she found and the family she nearly lost. And it will matter to Holden most of all, because in choosing to save Malcolm, he will have done something even more difficult than showing mercy to a stranger. He will have refused to let betrayal define the entirety of the man he becomes. That is why this story cuts so deeply through the heart of every character involved. It is not simply about illness. It is about the terrifying collision between biology and morality, between old sins and present emergencies, between love that arrives late and anger that arrives exactly on time. Lily is forced to confront how grief can distort devotion until it becomes manipulation. Holden is forced to confront how righteous anger can harden into a self-inflicted prison. Malcolm is forced to confront the painful truth that regret does not disappear just because death is near. Stephanie is forced to confront the ruin that secrecy leaves behind when the future finally demands honesty. No one walks through this unchanged. No one gets a clean redemption. But within all the accusation, all the bitterness, all the emotional wreckage, there remains one haunting, stubborn possibility. That a family broken by silence may still find the smallest beginning of truth through sacrifice, and that sometimes the person most justified in turning away becomes the very person who keeps everyone else alive.